We are. All right. So hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ellen Rainey, and I work in Hamilton's alumni office. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to this evening's session on social distancing in the garden, a thoughtful approach to understanding and appreciating landscape design. And I'm especially pleased to introduce our presenter, Scott Brinitzer. With the exception of a brief stint for college in Central New York, Scott is a lifelong resident of the Washington, D.C. area, which is experiencing thunderstorms right now, so be patient. In addition to his degree from Hamilton, he has a certificate degree in landscape design from the George Washington University. Now, just 2 years after graduating from Hamilton, Scott founded Scott Brinitzer Design Associates in Arlington, Virginia. And as the owner and principal landscape designer of the company, he has spent the last 30 something years developing a company that has had award-winning landscape design and also does premier garden installation. Now, I say this not just because it's on his website, but I speak from personal experience because Scott designed my garden when I lived in Virginia. And his work is lovely. It really is. And I will say that since he worked on my yard when we were, again, both children, he has expanded and upgraded his work significantly. And you'll see some of that tonight. That is not my garden in Virginia with the faces in it. Regardless of the locale, Scott works with the natural environment to create beautiful and enjoyable spaces that enhance the homeowner's quality of life. Scott's been involved with lots of things in his community in Arlington, and he's also a member of Hamilton's Arboretum Advisory Committee. So you know that Sharon has muted us all, and we're going to stay on mute while Scott is speaking. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and Stephanie will pose them to Scott as we go. We'll also have time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm unmuted, is that correct? I just want to make sure I did that right. Okay. So tonight's topic is could be quite broad and would be very difficult to speak to a large audience since everyone here is living in a different area of the country and perhaps even who knows where else in the world with different climate zones, soils, and so on. And so tonight, my goal is really to focus on the structure of a garden. And by that, I mean how we begin to build a garden from a blank sheet of paper. And I'm hoping that this is transferable across state boundaries and wherever you may wander in your life. And give you a way, I just want to give you some of the tools, or one of the tools that I use in our company to begin to organize our ideas, much as you would organize an outline for a paper that you're writing, in order to create a composition that has merit and that travels throughout the seasons and through, over the number of years that a garden exists. Of course, since I'm a landscape architect now, I passed all my exams, which was a great joy of mine that I got to do that a couple of years ago. Since then, we've been readily expanding the scope of our work as we've been accredited to do larger projects. But tonight, I'm really going to focus on the homeowner's garden, but these, again, can be brought out to a bigger scale because the ideas are really transferable. The image in the background, or that is on the screen right now, is really truly social distancing in the garden. These faces are part of a sculptural garden in France in the town of Etretat, probably butchering that name, done by a Russian landscape designer or architect, I'm not sure which. Matt and I stumbled on this last year while taking a tour of Normandy. This really was a spectacular site, but I just thought it would be a fun intro to showing a whimsical part of social distancing in the garden. And here, truly, this is an entire sculpture garden, hand manicured, pretty amazing. So the reason I was over in Normandy, and I'm going to start with our first garden, and this we're calling Garden 1. This is a 17th century farmhouse in Normandy, and my firm was lucky enough to have a connection and be hired by the owner of this property to begin to develop a garden for this property. And so this is what we started with, a blank slate, and I'm just going through the setting. The first part of this is our charge was to create a parterre. And as the client said, she wanted me to create a classic French parterre and then screw it up and make it more fun. So as she's a good Australian woman, I said, let's have a great time, and why don't we get going on this? So here again, this is a blank canvas. That's a French, their idea of starting a hornbeam hedge. She asked for something that would be 2 or 3 meters tall, which would be 6+ feet. And she came back and they had planted sticks. So this was our first challenge, that was our beginning point. From there, again, this is a centuries-old yew that was chopped back. It had gone out of control. And I'm showing this because this is the beginning of my speech or my talk about structure. And the French are famous for structure and clipped hedges and walls. And here you see a situation, this is another garden in Normandy, where they've actually used the hornbeam hedges to create the walls. And then those are actual grapes growing. And so you have this juxtaposition of great structure and pathways, and at the same time you then have this flourish of slightly out of control plantings. And so this is the context within which we're working in this particular site, which is unique to the country and the region. And we then developed this base plan, and our focus here, this is the plan view looking down into the garden. The building is at the bottom of your screen. It's a long, narrow building. It has 2 prongs or U's, if you will, or creates a U in the front where the gravel courtyard is. And in the back where we're working, you can, again, the idea that I'm trying to get across here is we created volumes and forms and pathways, all of which don't have enough time to go over in detail right now. But essentially, we decided on taking a project and creating balance in the design without creating absolute symmetry. And so the client liked this. I felt it met the site, and the metric by which we're looking at this is really the balance of the larger circles, which are overhead canopy trees, then smaller or medium-sized circles, which would be hedges, and then the graphic detail would be generally smaller material. But it's a way to organize the property without making it an absolute mirror of itself. The beauty of this project also was that I got to go plant shopping in the Netherlands. And we decided to start with the structure of the garden. So the next several slides are from where I spent Thanksgiving last year. And this was day 1. And day 1 was delivery of the first 25 trees, all dug and shipped within 1 week. These are 20-foot tall turkey oaks, an oak that I learned quite a bit about. But day 1, delivery, offloading. That's actually the client in the back. She was very hands-on. And some of our specialty plants here, these are 30-year-old trees that have grown to be no more than 1 foot wide. These are hornbeam hedges or hornbeam trees. They're our native hornbeam that we grow here in the United States, but the Dutch have found a way that we can have those as instant hedges. And so the first part of this work was not to put in the beautiful small flowering hydrangeas. It was to build the structure of the garden. This is what we built out of the site in 3 days. We had 3 men and 2 machines, and I stood outside for 3 days and had the time of my life in the pouring rain, and ended up with pneumonia after this, but you know, it was a good weight loss program. So anyway, the scenes here are of the hornbeam hedge up already. The turkey oaks are on the left of your screen. This really wonderful hedge maple is a little bit in the foreground to the right. And again, looking out of the house, we created quite a mud mess, but we have the structure built. We have the major plantings in place, and the wood trellises around, or wood stakes around these plants are extraordinarily necessary, because the day we were there were 70-mile-an-hour winds coming off the Atlantic Ocean. The gardeners actually bolted or strapped the trees into the ground at the root ball level, and then caged them with these wooden stakes. But the point, again, I'm trying to get across is, here you have a starting point. We have the first go at the garden. It's in leaf now. I've been sent some photos. Unfortunately, of course, I cannot go see it. Masonry was supposed to start this year, but that's been delayed for a year. But again, the idea here that that I wish to share is that the overall style or design of the garden has been set, and then everything else is going to follow as we go back down through the stages, and as I work with this client over the next probably 10 years at least, as we build it out. The next garden is going to be completely different. This is an attempt for me to show you process and form. This garden is completely sustainable. It's in Arlington, Virginia. We have a spring in the backyard. If you know Arlington at all, it's an extremely urban environment. But here we had a floodplain, if you will, the back garden completely saturated. And on the left, you will see my initial line work, where I'm organizing the collection of the spring in the large circle, which will become a pond. And then there's a cross current of water that traverses the site that cannot be captured in the upper pond. And this whole entire garden is based on that really quick sketch, which then moved to a little more defined, I would call it concept, where again, I'm showing lawn area, which is the green, blue is the water, and then the circles would be your hierarchy of trees. And you always start with, of course, the largest, and then move your way down to the smaller trees. Pathways, all that goes into informing how you are going to organize the structure of the space, and how you're going to move people through the space and get them to a focal point or an end point, a destination point. But the studies are rather quick for me now on most projects. And of course, as we always say, the devil is in the details, which is true, because all of this had to go through a year-long review process, because it was considered to be a resource protection area. And we piped 75 feet into the storm sewer by Arlington County forcing us to do that. But the water all traverses the site, drops into a series of rain gardens, purification steps and is released into the county storm sewer as absolutely clear sediment-free water. So something which I really enjoy doing. Here you can see the actual, the built walkway and then the pond in the distance. This is the reverse angle. The structure on this garden is formed by the walkways, by the pond. The garden is allowed to be, or the lawn is allowed to be free form, but simply by creating the structure of the walks, you create the volume of the garden. And so this is the absolute antithesis or direct opposite of our French project. So we're thinking in two brains here, from symmetry that's been blown up to the total lack of symmetry, and responding to environmental concerns. This pond, they should charge rent or a fee, because there are literally hundreds of birds that are in there every day. It's the perfect wading height for birds. And it is an absolute joy to sit there and just observe the birds. They've become tame, and the fox, the raccoon, I mean, the problem with the raccoon is they keep digging the lawn up, but other than that, we're in good shape. So I'm gonna move on again. This third garden here is again a different style. This shows some of our process. And in the bottom right, you're going to see again a quick study of form and organization of the space. The house is above and the street is below. The street is actually the house is at a diagonal to the street. I like to sketch. They're not the most beautiful sketches in the world, but they allow me to express what I'm thinking. To get the structure of the walls. In this case, you're going to see some images where this will become clear, but it allows me to organize in 3D without sitting at a computer and mastering AutoCAD or getting onto graph paper and trying to work out the wall heights immediately. These are, again, quick ways that I start to organize the space and to organize the activities that will go on in each of these spaces. This is an early concept, and what you should notice here are the half circle that is rather prominent in the lower left, and the strong rectangular line center screen. And you'll see the juxtaposition, or the way that the house and the street really don't work together, and they're pushing and pulling in a way that would be difficult. So these are walls that are going to echo the architecture of the home. So we're going to use the same brick that the house is constructed of, and we're going to bring the house out into the garden. That is my first and foremost idea that was that formulated this design. Second to that, the client wanted privacy, and so we got into more of the details, but really the broad stroke lines of the rectangle and then the half circle, and of course the elevation change, which is the 3 rectangular lines behind the rectangular line. That is, you're walking down to a lower garden. 3 years after construction, this is what it looks like. This, again, I'm not usually this floriferous with my plantings, but the client loves gardening, and so I decided to get in the sandbox and the dirt with her. We moved a lot of her material around and then just played. And you can do that because we have this. It's clean, it's simple, it's strong, and it organizes the space. And so this staircase is hidden behind the wall. You don't know it's there. So there's an element of surprise as you enter the garden, because it's behind that wall and that pillar with the light. Those two items started the whole cascade of decision making. Of course, I love my boxwoods as long as they're not dying with the blight. And at this time, we're using varieties that are less susceptible, because we're able to have a garden structure that lasts throughout the year so that the iris can pop up and who knows what else can keep going in the garden throughout the year. This is my last garden, and this is one that was a complete surprise to me because we started out with a typical Arlington bungalow, and this client really was a lot of fun to work with because they both had confidence in our abilities, and they had confidence in their own vision, and we worked together to build this. But they started out as non-gardeners and now are really enjoying the space, even texting and calling me when certain plants are blooming and demanding that I come over and look at it. So this was a quick study of some Virginia cedars that would go on the left side of this bungalow, perhaps some crepe myrtle on the right side, the boxwood collection up front, and a new front walk. Originally, I thought a picket fence might work. They said, well, we're not really picket fence people, so we got rid of that. The back garden, this is a quick study again of some layout of walkways that are going to connect a future garage, which is the structure you see in the back, to a new terrace that would be at the bottom of their deck, and then a walkway around the property so that you could maneuver within the garden and around it in a very clean, orderly way. This is the left side of the building as you face it, and the structure here again, I'm identifying the native cedar. I'm identifying a sharp line that echoes the architecture of the porch being brought out into the garden. You'll see that there's a theme coming up here that the house is brought out. The house is constantly brought out into the garden to make your living space even bigger. And this is what evolved from the thought process. And again, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but essentially you have your center home. The dark massing behind the home was the builder installed not wood deck, so we call that plastic deck, and plastic rail, which wouldn't have been my first choice, but the person who was renovating the building decided that's what they wanted. We constructed a new front walk. The client said he didn't want it to be a straight, direct route to the house, so we had to play with that a little bit. The garage is located in the back. That was a completely new build. Arlington County reversed themselves midway through the design and said that because it's a corner lot, the garage had to be moved 10 feet closer to the house. And this was 8 months into the design process, which then really made us have to jump on a new design for the back, or at least modify it. Here is what we had to work with. Now, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm showing the worst pictures in January of the year when, of course, I'm going to look good after this because you can't get much worse, right? And this is what we did with it. And so the front is a series of, the walk is a series of limestone slabs that have an undefined edge so that the zoysia lawn can move in and out of it. And this is a toothed effect, which I enjoy when you are faced with a client who wants something a little different. The simple boxwood placement in the front with a field of dwarf mondo grass. The zoysia was selected because it is extraordinarily drought and heat tolerant. And in our climate here, lawns are neither southern nor northern, which means they tend to rot or die of too much cold or the cold weather. And I thought, well, we all thought, let's have a nice lawn in summer and we'll let it go hay straw brown in winter. This was the backyard, and we were told, yes, the garage is going in here and you have to figure out what you're going to do with this without the garage being there. And again, the house grew toward the back, and again, you see the deck not perfectly placed on the house. the former homeowner decided to put their own sidewalk in and then end it, and it just ended. And the foreground is a hill between you, the street, and you, and there is in the house, and there's no curb or gutter, but completely on my client's property. This is what I did with it. And so you can see the garage has been built. We extended the sidewalk. We gave the sidewalk a hard right to send people back out into the public domain, so they wouldn't kill themselves while walking through here. And you know, I should be talking about structure here, and that structure is provided by the sidewalk. And then the color, of course, this is the garden, and it's only its second year. The black-eyed Susans, this is from this morning, are just out of control. If again, I'm talking about sustainability on every project. This is a pollinator garden that runs from March at the latest, maybe even February, through Christmas. Here was the backyard that we had to start with. Notice there's no garage. And here's what we did with the site. We actually used the foundation of the building when the building moved toward us by 10 feet. We used that as literally the structure. The wall of the garage retains the planting bed between the garage and the terrace. The structure was built with the seat wall, which defines the edge of the property. We repeated the limestone slabs that began in the front, and that's a little more about style. So I'm getting off my topic, but within this structure, I was able to use the style and repeat it throughout the garden. This is interesting, and remember that first sketch when I pulled the house out into the garden when we were talking about this project here. And this is just a simple concrete curb. And the concrete curb serves two purposes. It's the structure of the garden, and it's a defining edge between the zoysia lawn on the right and what will be the perennial walk on the left. And if you know zoysia, it likes to move and go through gardens. So it doesn't go through concrete, thank God. So this is deep enough that the roots can't get under it, and we're able to maintain a clear, concise line, which means no matter how messy the perennials get, it looks clean. And this is a year in, and I use a technique here where I use gravel as the mulch, and then we plant without a defined bed edge, excuse me. And it just creates a suggested pathway through the garden, and you are walking through the perennials. You're in nature, you're in the garden, but the line there, the structure of the concrete edge is really your defining edge, and it keeps you organized, and you can come back after a long trip and say, well, you know, at least the zoysia is still in one place. This is what we did to create the transition between the house and the garage. You're now standing at the garage and looking back to the house. We had a level change of a little over 24 inches. Not much, but just enough to create this gentle walkway up to the house. The white lattice has been de-emphasized a bit through some plantings this year, but because right now it's a little bit bright in our face, but the structure is created by the retaining walls and by the level changes. And we could have chosen any number of plants to then express the garden. Here, we did something for the first time. We used creeping thyme, actually a lemon thyme, as the ground cover. And we were fortunate in that this house is on a gravel-based soil, which is very unusual for our area, which means it's well drained. And so the plants are just taking off. Sustainability, again, is important. Let me just, and that driveway that you just saw is the collector. It collects all the rainwater from the entire property and puts it into a 36-inch deep bed of gravel and sand. Here, structure again, you're seeing movement between coming off of the deck onto the terrace that is in the back garden. We repeated the style from the front, which is the toothed limestone, combined with the very symmetrical bluestone, which is in the center. Over time, you will not see the house across the street, but again, we weren't going to just jam in mature plants, only to have them falter in the ensuing years. Looking back, we created structure here. This is a landing or a patio that helps us transition from the side of the house, the front right side, into the back garden. It unifies material between the concrete that we used in the front and the limestone. So these are places we're creating within the garden. So you're within the envelope of the garden, but you clearly can see, oh, I'm moving from one space to another. This feels comfortable. This reminds me of another space. But so I'm still in the same garden, but it's again can be expressed differently throughout the property. What was once just a wasteland between you and the street, this is an alley of crepe myrtle. Today they're in absolute incredible bloom, but again, with it being almost 100 degrees here today, some of the photos today showed some wilted hydrangeas. So thought it best to bring one from the back. Here again, the bluestone pathway organizes the space. It allows the incredible variety of the hydrangea to spill over and be loose and open while still keeping the design intact. And I end with this here. As you come around the corner from the house, the gravel of from the perennial walk that you see in the distance is repeated here, but it's encased in the same geometric form. So on the left side of the house, as you face it, you have an ill-defined pathway created out of this gravel with the perennials bouncing around. To the right side, where it's a little bit more controlled, or considerably more controlled, you have a clean public-facing side to the house and the long alley down to the back. So that is my overview of 4 very different properties. And again, I hope I touched on the idea of bringing the structure from the house into the garden, using level change as structural organization, repeating material, and that geometric forms, as well as plant forms and repetition, are great ways to understand spaces. And I think really in a way, you know if you're in a good space. I think we all know when we feel comfortable in a space. I know that we need to feel secure, safe. We need to have a garden or a place that feels human scale. We don't want to feel in danger of being picked off by a hawk or something because we're, very exposed. And all of that comes from a subliminal message that the designer or the architect is putting out that says, you are here, you're in a place, you're in a defined area, and we have an organization here. And I hope that my style is one that is a friendly organization. I don't want to overly program my clients. I'd like them to be able to sit down and have a glass of wine or other beverage and hang out with friends, and it's comfortable, well done, but not pretentious, because that's not who I am. And I like to sit in the spaces that we create. So thank you.
We do have a couple of questions, Scott, if you're ready to answer
Sure.
some. The first one is from our very own Sharon Rippey. Sharon, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I did. I'm sorry, and I'm getting into plants per usual. So I got the answer. So the last house you showed, there were a white snowball bush, which is hydrangea.
Right.
And if you lived in central New York, where I garden, would you do hydrangea snowball bush or viburnum?
I think the Incredible is cold hardy to zone 4 because it grows on it flowers on new growth, as opposed to the more traditional pink, blue, purple hydrangeas, which their blooms are frozen off in the winter in northern climates. But the I'm blanking on the name now, but the Annabelle hydrangeas, which these are all derivatives of, and they're from Proven Winners out of Michigan. So I know they're grown in Michigan, so they probably will do well there.
Thank you.
Our next question is from another colleague of mine, Krista Campbell. Krista, would you like to unmute?
I think I got it. I just wondered how you connected with the client in France.
Oh, well, a little unfair advantage. My brother lives in France, and so he and his wife were, I think, pushing for me in a way. And then this client that I have is very particular, and so I didn't think she was going to hire me. I thought she'd go with a very named person from Europe, perhaps, but we did an interview and a few sketches, and she said, let's have a go, and off we went. So
that's great.
Yeah.
If there are other questions, you can go ahead and add them to the chat and we can unmute you. Okay, we have a question from Ellen Rainey, class of '87. Ellen.
I do. So that was great, Scott. Thank you. And it's fun to see Arlington houses and what you've done to them, because I'm like, oh, I think I know where that one is. So you talked about using gravel as mulch, and I am all about like being as low maintenance as I can be in my garden. So if you use gravel as mulch, A, does it keep weeds down? B, does it like stay from year to year to year? Is it like a one and done type of thing?
So with gravel, we have to be careful with it here because we're under the Chesapeake Bay ordinances, and they consider gravel to be paving, which is impervious, and we're constantly rated on the amount of pervious ground we have because we don't want to run the water off. The challenge with gravel is the only area, the area where you walk on our paths have a stone dust base. So you would have a little bit of compressed crushed stone with the gravel placed on top of that. That allows for a much lower maintenance walkway. It's also firm. All the gravel is just one pebble thick. It's not like walking in Clinton snow or on a beach. It's meant to be firm underfoot. And the idea then is to bleed the gravel into the beds so that the plants that are around your central organizing walkway, in whichever form you're doing, can move into that gravel. And so that's what keeps the maintenance down. The walks I have here at our house have been in place for about 30 years, and I pull weeds every year. Yes, there are some that come up, but it's a lot less maintenance than a mulched bed where I'm getting, who knows, weed seeds coming in from the mulch itself.
Okay, thank you.
We've got an interesting question from Peter Schumacher. Peter, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I was curious. I'm sure in your work you run into surprises and challenges that you hadn't foreseen. And I'm curious, what was your biggest challenge you've had to kind of scratch your head and maybe go back to the drawing board again?
So it's happening right now, in real time, as they say. I have a client that engaged us over 10 years ago to design a garden. The client was persistent and insisted on a pool. And she decided that she was going to build the pool that I put on a concept drawing. She did so with only a pool permit and nothing else. And she directed the builder to change the elevation of the backyard by 11 feet. There was a storm a year ago, and the people downhill from her complained to the county. The county came in and the sheriff showed up and charged the client with code violations. And they are now in the process of ripping the entire garden out except for the pool. So we are now having to redesign the garden in accordance with the county's new approved plan. So that is the largest challenge I've ever faced. But luckily, I remain not liable for that, because again, we didn't have involvement until we were called in to rescue this. So we're in the process of reimagining a space where the elevation has to drop 10 feet in one area. Drainage swale has to be reintroduced. Water purification facility, which means, again, this is all the Chesapeake Bay ordinances that we're working with. So it's in this case, I have the upper hand because I said to the client, look, you can't cheat. This is the way it's going to be, and you're going to have to listen to me, because we're not doing anything that's going to put me in jail, lose my license, or otherwise, and we're going to make this look good, and we'll figure it out. So we're in the beginning stages of that. We moved all the plant material last week in the 100-degree heat, and it's all surviving. But we're introducing a really interesting diagonal swale, and it remains to be seen how this all works out. But that's a good question for the time.
Wow.
It looks like we have a few more questions. The first one is from, it looks like Bruce McIntyre. Bruce, did you have a couple of questions?
Yes, thank you very much. I noticed the steps in the gardens. Do you tell your clients about the ADA rules? And I guess they don't apply to private gardens, having ramps instead of steps.
Right. With these houses, with my clients, since we're not working on public projects, they don't need to be ADA compliant. But what we do try to do is we work on steps that have a fairly low rise to them and a large tread, which makes them a lot easier to traverse. And they're a lot. We try to be as genteel as possible when you move through elevations. Of course, the more you do, the lower rise, that means the longer the staircase is going to be. But we always try not to group more than 4 steps together at the most, or maybe 5. But really give steps and landings so that it's not arduous to walk up. And if a ramp needs to go in later, the steps can become dual purposed if need be. There are ways to retrofit if people stay in the house for to a point where they need that.
Secondly, when a prospective client contacts you, in a sentence, how do you usually describe your gardening style compared to other landscaped architects? Is it modern,
we try to say it's somewhat simple and elegant in a way that I try to say that it's not going to be it may be done very well, but I'm not a fan of fire and water together in one place, or it's going to be timeless. I try to do gardens or projects and properties that will look good now and in 20 years, and you can't really date them to a certain period. The period of, outdoor fireplaces was very big about 10 years ago, and a lot of people put in hulking fireplaces, and we did a few, but we tried to make them very simple. We don't get a lot of requests for those now, but we get a lot of requests for fire features such as propane, a fire pit or something. We call it fire pit. I don't know if that's an awful word, but it's a, they can be done well. So we know there are elements that come in and go, but your hedges, your walks, your overall structure should be able to stand the test of time, and you should be able to renovate the garden now or in 10 years. And you should also be able to go back in and find the good pieces of a garden and highlight them.
It's nice to see that people appreciate your ahas, the modern ahas that people have forgotten what those were, but
Yeah.
people who play golf and see the bunkers and know what an aha.
It looks like our very own John Murphy has a question next. John, would you like to unmute?
Hi, Scott. So softball, if you will, I'm wondering from your perspective, how your background, how your liberal arts education has informed your work, has it helped you in your career in a particular way? And does it set you apart from other designers?
Well, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I have I have one employee right now who went to Penn State, and all I can say is I had to teach him how to write because he couldn't do an email. Very smart in certain ways, but couldn't pivot to clients' demands that may have changed. I absolutely could not do what I'm doing without the liberal arts background, because every day of my life I am doing multiple different tasks. When I started the company when I was 25, I think, or 26, I don't even remember anymore. I thought I could, and I tried, and I didn't have all of the technical background, but I thought I knew enough to be dangerous or something like that, and I just kept going. And I never have stopped learning. I can't stop learning. It's just not possible. I think about what I do all the time. Currently, I have a house in Delaware, and it has a slightly different climate, and I have 26 pine trees growing that I got out of the gutter because they were seedlings, and I wanted to try growing trees. And so I'm enjoying learning the pitfalls of that. I also learned how to start Hinoki cypress from seed, and actually got 4 of them to root. But every day I am a businessman. I am composing emails. I'm writing proposals. I'm doing creating a design. Again, reviewing the books and managing people within the office. And then, of course, I always say I'm vertically integrated because I'm working with masons, I'm working with irrigation contractors, I'm working with the full range of our population. It's really gratifying to be able to provide work to so many. So I don't know, I could go on for this, but truly I couldn't do what I'm doing if I was in one lane and knew how to do one thing and only thought of things in a certain way, and couldn't be persuaded to walk out the door and come in again and look at the design on the table and say, oh, that's not working. Or, yeah, it is. So.
Thank you.
We've got a couple more questions, first from Judy and then Diana. Judy, would you like me to unmute you, or? Oh, you're all set. Having some trouble understanding you.
Because we can't hear you. So Stephanie, why don't you just read her question?
Sure. It looks like she's asking, any examples of tropical gardens that are drought and pest resistant? What material would you recommend for walkways that doesn't retain heat and water? And what are good alternatives to St. Augustine grass that we can use year round?
So a lot of this is a little bit out of my league because I've only done one property in Florida, which is tropical, and that was for another Hamilton alum. And I really had to rely on the nurseries there to help me out with a lot of the plant choices. Again, I was working mainly with the structure of the garden and the overall layout. But we don't use St. Augustine grass. I mean, I used zoysia, and I used that on that one project, the last one I showed you, because it is drought tolerant. And in fact, you could kill it by overwatering it. So the clients don't water that much at all. We've moved to, we must know our soils. And I think that's one of the greatest ways to be sustainable is to understand where you're working, because the garden number 4 has a completely different soil than the house 4 blocks away where we were having the pond. So I went from what's called marine clay in this area, which is a plastic soil, which stretches and moves, and you can make pottery out of it, to the gravel soil where the clay never bonds. And so I would never do a perennial garden in the glue soil because it's not going to work. The plants will require too much water and they'll die because they'll rot. So you really have to start from the soil up to understand what you're doing. And of course, the best sustainable garden is one that survives and is giving back to the earth, which means it's, it's growing, it's creating a pollinator garden. It's not letting the water run off, and that's done again by a successful garden. You have a lot of plant communities, and that's a key word for me, is plant community, because it's not just one plant, it's a combination, and they all work off of one another. So you're getting a system where you have the property is cooled by the overhead canopy. It allows the mid canopy to grow, and then your lower canopy as well, or your lower ground cover. I'm not a big fan of mulch, as you could see in many of the projects. I think it's a great waste of money to keep throwing down mulch every year, and it does nothing for the environment. It also is not beneficial for the ground, because all of your activity, if you will, some of your microorganism activity is then brought to the surface to decompose the mulch, and I want it down in the soil. So light mulching, we use compost. There's the Maryland wastewater system makes this amazing product called Leaf Grow, which is magic soil, and it's better than putting fertilizer down. It leaches into the earth, and I'm kind of going on here, but long story short, there's not one answer. I don't know tropical gardens that well, but it's always site specific. And I try. John, to your answer also, I'm also a teacher. So to my clients, I try to teach and express why some of their ideas won't work. Okay, because just doing what they say will work, or what they want, is not the right thing to do. As I saw, with my friend who's having her garden torn out, because if it won't work, I don't want to be part of it. It's not worth my time.
Okay, I think we have time for another question, and it looks like Diana Reynolds has questions about driveways.
Hi, Scott. It's Diana Reynolds, and I was lucky enough to walk through your garden maybe 10 or 12 years ago at a Hamilton event. I live in Alexandria, so not too far, and you had a wonderful event where you toured us through your garden, and that was a real treat. And you recommended, I think it was Saratoga, and Saratoga, and so I put that in my garden, and I love it. So I just want to thank you for that. And so driveways, do you have, some driveway styles that you like, I know the pervious, impervious, the crushed gravel, there's so many different, and it feels like new things are coming out for driveways, just if you have some experience with driveways.
We have a lot of experience with driveways now, because that's where we are being mandated to put our the overflow or the water from the stormwater runoff. The pervious driveways, however, have some serious issues where they can clog because the stones are supposed to remain apart from one another, and the gravel between them is supposed to remain clean, able to take the water that's falling and purify it. That's been changed a little bit now, where they're doing direct downspout feeds into driveways, actually, and then putting observation wells in the drive so you can see how the driveway is percolating. So the pervious driveway out of the pavers, they are nice, as long as you choose a nice paver. There's some really good ones on the market now. Teco Block is a company out of Canada that has some, I like a lot of their material. It's a little more modern. We generally don't do a lot of gravel driveways because in the rare chance that we get snow, people are shoveling the gravel off their driveway and into the beds. A simple asphalt driveway can be inexpensive, but it does radiate heat. But if it's bordered with a nice paver or something along the edges, it can be, you can have that economical mix between spending too much and having it look good. Concrete, I do a lot of tinted concrete right now. So we, instead of putting a white driveway down, we usually use a beige or something that it sits down more of an earth tone, as long as it doesn't tend toward pink, which is one of the problems with mixes. Tinted concretes, you can really go wrong with that. But, you know, cost plays a big role in this. Clients don't have endless budgets. They don't want to usually spend too much on the driveway. They want it to be easy to maintain. And again, when it's mandated, and even not, we are using the pervious driveway. That tends to work very well. But, you know, again, lighter colors don't retain heat at night, and that helps our urban heat island here, which is pretty dramatic, especially on days like we've been having.
Thank you.
I think that is the extent of the questions in the chat, and it is miraculously 8:02.
Hey.
So I'm muting Judy because she sounds like a munchkin. I don't know why that is. You sound like a munchkin, Judy. Have you been inhaling helium again or something? But Scott, this was so much fun. I think I speak for everybody. It was so much fun. It was great to see your beautiful designs. Please come up to Clinton anytime. Anytime, you're welcome. Come walk the Glen, come see the campus, and come check out my yard. And everybody else, thank you so much for joining tonight. And we look forward to seeing you on a future Hamilton virtual event. This was recorded and will be up on our website within a week, I would say. So
thank you all very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
It was so much fun, Scott. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
I loved it.